Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The government says the UK is more prepared than ever for the country to leave the European Union without a deal after a leaked document outlining the potential negative impacts was published in a Sunday newspaper. The report from the Cabinet Office warns of food, medicine and fuel shortages and suggests a return to a hard Irish border is all but inevitable. The man in charge of planning for a no-deal Brexit, Michael Gove, acknowledged there might be some short-term problems, but said the report is a worst-case scenario and out of date. Boris Johnson is preparing to meet European leaders this week to make his case for a new Brexit deal. Here's our political correspondent, Nick Eardley.
It's been the mantra of Boris Johnson's government.
Come out of the EU on October the 31st. No ifs or buts. We need to get Brexit done. We have to leave the EU on October the 31st.
So far, though, Europe has remained adamant the Brexit deal won't change. So this week, the Prime Minister will take his case to Berlin and Paris to tell two of the EU's most influential leaders things have to change. Number 10 thinks the chance of a breakthrough is slim, expectation management. But the PM knows he needs to make progress soon, or the UK will be facing a no-deal exit. This morning, the Sunday Times published a leaked government document looking at what that might mean on the food supply.
Critical elements of the food supply chain may be in short supply.
On plans to keep the Irish border open.
The model is likely to prove unsustainable because of economic, legal and biosecurity risks.
Michael Gove is the minister in charge of getting the government ready for no deal.
This is an old document that, since it was published and circulated, the government have taken significant additional steps to ensure that we are prepared to leave on October the 31st, deal or no deal.
Do you accept there could be food and fuel shortages in a no-deal scenario?
It is the case, as everyone knows, that if we do have a no-deal exit, there will inevitably be some disruption, some bumps in the road.
Number 10, meanwhile, is furious. A source accused an unnamed former minister of leaking this document to try and influence talks with Europe. But for opponents of no deal, those Tory rebels and opposition MPs convinced it would be a disaster, leaks like this are confirmation that their worst fears could become a reality.
This isn't Project Fear, this is Project Reality. And what we've seen revealed in the Sunday Times today sets out that we could be here in 2019 with shortages of food, shortages of fuel, shortages of medicine.
The next few weeks will be crucial in determining whether no deal becomes reality. The Brexit process is reaching a crunch point and nobody really knows for sure what will happen. Nick Eardley, BBC News.
Downing Street has issued a blistering attack against former disgruntled ministers that they claim leaked a secret cabinet briefing on the effects of a no-deal Brexit. Operation Yellowhammer, said to show the most likely scenario, warns of chaos at the ports and shortages of food, medicine and fuel. Government sources say the timing was aimed at influencing talks this week with the leaders of France and Germany. Here's our political correspondent, Daniel Hewitt.
Pile up at ports, delays getting medicine and shortages of food and fuel. The warnings from a leaked government document that states neither business nor the British public are prepared for a no-deal Brexit at the end of October. Downing Street blamed the leak on a disgruntled former minister as this current minister moved to downplay the dossier.
Some of the concerns about a no-deal Brexit have been exaggerated. It's certainly the case that there will be bumps in the road, some element of disruption in the event of no deal. But the document that has appeared in the Sunday Times was an attempt in the past to work out what the very, very worst situation would be so that we could take steps to mitigate that. And we have taken steps.
But the document, codenamed Operation Yellowhammer, paints a different picture. No deal would mean medical supplies being vulnerable to severe extended delays, shortages of fresh food with prices going up, and disruptions to the availability of fuel, as well as delays at UK ports, which could last up to 3 months.
The remarkable aspect of this is this has been produced by the civil servants working for Boris Johnson, and yet he continues to entirely disregard this and to make threats about leaving for a no-deal Brexit, which would in fact create a major and serious crisis which would affect everybody in this country in their daily lives.
The document also warns that a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic is inevitable, with protests and road blockages likely, a prediction dismissed by the DUP.
We need to look at all of the facts. We need to try and get a deal, focus on getting a deal that is good for Northern Ireland and one that works for the whole of the United Kingdom. But what we mustn't do is get caught up in Project Fear, which unfortunately a lot of people seem to be doing at this present moment in time.
But as he prepares for his first meetings with French and German leaders this week, there is very little hope on either side that no deal, whatever the consequences, can be avoided.
And Daniel is here. So what hopes for those talks then?
Virtually none. Neither side, the EU or the UK, expect much to come out of these talks this week. The first time, remember, that Boris Johnson is meeting with Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron. Number 10 say that the significance of these meetings is actually not about Brexit. It's about Boris Johnson meeting with the two leaders ahead of the G7 summit in France next weekend. And Downing Street tell me that Boris Johnson will tell them face to face what he's been telling them on the phone, that Britain will not come to the negotiating table in Brussels unless the EU is willing to accept the current deal is dead, that a new deal needs to be negotiated. Macron on Thursday and Merkel on Wednesday are expected to say that isn't going to happen. And one of the reasons Downing Street believes that the EU is so unwilling to budge is that they believe that MPs in the UK are telling the EU, look, we can stop Boris Johnson, we can stop a no-deal Brexit. So the EU is relying on Parliament to stop a no-deal Brexit happening. So no deal remains the default option. Tonight, Angela Merkel has said we are prepared for everything. Should it come to that, then we are prepared for this eventuality too. So no deal at the moment is the option because of this Mexican standoff.
OK, Daniel Hewitt, thank you very much.
Now then, shortages of food and medicine, port delays and a hard Irish border. That's what we should expect if we leave the EU with no deal, according to a leaked cabinet document. Michael Gove, the minister responsible for no-deal preparations, said the dossier set out what he called the worst-case scenario and insisted that very significant steps have now been taken to boost Brexit planning since Boris Johnson moved into number 10. All this comes as the Prime Minister prepares for a potential confrontation with EU leaders this week to try and persuade them to negotiate a new Brexit deal. Here's Jane Dodge.
Lorries going nowhere, ports log-jammed, causing shortages of food and medicine. A bleak scenario of life after a no-deal Brexit revealed in a leaked government document. Boris Johnson has ridiculed such forecasts in the past.
And I've heard some gloom and on poppers say that the planes won't fly if we come out with on WTO terms and there won't be any clean drinking water. And I've even heard it said, I think, by the Department of Agriculture, that there wouldn't be adequate supplies of milk solids and glucose and whey, wherewith to make the Mars bars in Slough on which our children depend.
The details are in a Cabinet Office document called Operation Yellowhammer and marked official sensitive. Leaked to the Sunday Times, it says fresh food supply will decrease, which will reduce availability and choice and increase the price, and warns there is a risk that panic buying will disrupt food supplies. With the UK dependent on the EU for medical supplies, the document forecasts significant disruption lasting up to 6 months, with the ominous warning that any disruption to supplies would reduce our ability to prevent and control disease. It says delays at airports and ports are likely and warns the worst disruption to the short channel crossings might last 3 months.
These are real prospects. And it may be that they can be smoothed out over weeks or months afterwards. But in the intervening period, the daily lives of people in this country will have been endangered and made difficult by the Boris Johnson's approach to Brexit and the threats he's making about taking us out with no deal.
A Number 10 source has blamed a former minister for leaking the report, written when Theresa May was in office. It has been presented to Mr Johnson's government, but the man now in charge of planning for a no-deal Brexit says this government is now far more prepared.
It's certainly the case that there will be bumps in the road, some element of disruption in the event of no deal. But the document that has appeared in the Sunday Times was an attempt in the past to work out what the very, very worst situation would be so that we could take steps to mitigate that. And we have taken steps.
Mr Gove insists there'll be no return to a hard border in Ireland if there's a no-deal Brexit. The leaked document says that will be unsustainable. It raises the prospect of border checks reminiscent of the Troubles and warns of protests and what it calls direct action.
This isn't Project Fear, this is Project Reality. and really does reinforce the need now to do all that we can to avoid a no-deal outcome, which doesn't have a democratic mandate and is clearly so damaging for this country.
Downing Street is furious about the timing of today's leaked document. Boris Johnson meets Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron in the next few days. It's not the image he wanted to convey to them of a country ready and prepared, if necessary, for a no-deal Brexit.